بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. It is Friday, November 4th, 2016. The class is on the prohibitions of the tongue. So we'll continue on in that inshallah. From the book that we are using, we're on page 48. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We ask Allah to open up our understanding and give us tawfiq. He said he moves. Last week's discussion was about singing and music and things like that. Now he moves into another topic, which is debate, called jidal. وللجدال تعتذر الأحكام يحرم أن يقصد به الإفهام. Debate can fall into any of the rulings of the Sharia. Thus, it is prohibited if a person only intends to defeat his opponent. Debate would be prohibited if the intention is solely to debate your opponent. And in this section, this is a massive section, but it's very good because I think we as Muslims should know what our religion says about debate or arguing with others about our religion. Okay? Now, in this, I'm going to be reading some sections of what ulama have discussed and what those conditions are and prohibitions. So it gets a little detailed. Okay? So if you have a question while I discuss them or need to repeat, go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, we will go on to the text, inshallah. So he says, debate. First of all, let's define debate. What is exactly debate, and what does he mean by jidal? Okay? He says, first we define it. So he says that debate is discussion and discourse of two or more parties, opposing groups, right? So different positions between the groups to establish a truth, negate something false, or to change an opinion. Okay? That is what debate is. To establish basically a truth or to correct something that's misunderstood. That's essentially debate. Okay? And this is prohibited if the intention of the person engaging in that debate is an incorrect intention. What are those intentions? That's what we're going to talk about. So, in a nutshell, it would be allowed to debate if you fall under certain restrictions or requirements in order to be able to debate. That would be allowed. Otherwise, it will not be allowed to argue with another person about the religion. Either to have a formal debate or anytime you speak to somebody to engage in a debate. Okay? It is prohibited if the person intends by it to defeat his opponent, to beat the person that he's debating. Some of these might sound shocking to you. If a person goes in a debate only because he wants to prove the other guy's wrong and defeat him, it's not allowed to do that. Okay? Why? Because then you're trying to beat the other person based on your own personal whim. It's not because of the truth. You cannot debate with someone on religion and then by it try to, you're trying to win your position over, so it's all about you. It's not really about the truth. The correct person would look for the truth to be revealed on whoever's tongue that it was debated. In fact, the early scholars used to make dua that the truth would be revealed on the tongue of the opponent, not even on the tongue of the person debating. Okay? So that's number one. Number two, if he intends to keep his opponent silent, this would also not be allowed, to gain superiority or honor in the eyes of people. So if a person debates just because they want to be recognized by people, to be looked at with respect because of it, this would not be allowed. Or if he intends arrogance, he's arrogant over the other person. Or if he intends to win the hearts of people, get people to like him more. By me defeating this person, people after that will respect me, know who I am. Okay? Any of that would be prohibited. Basically, in debate, essentially, you're trying to get rid of your own ego, your own position. You're trying to establish the truth. He says in the next lines that this is because debate causes many prohibited and destructive matters, such as hate, or hiqd, or ujub, which is vanity, or hubbujah, which is love of prestige or rank, high rank. Other examples of harm or other intention that could come about if you debate somebody, you could cause harm. The harm that could come out of it is jealousy, backbiting. You could end up lying because a person, he starts getting embarrassed or she starts getting embarrassed that they're being defeated, and then they'll start to lie to prove their position, right? So that could occur. And feelings might be hurt. You could hurt somebody's feeling. You could damage your relationship with them. You could end up just showing off because you have knowledge. The real knowledgeable people, they try to hide their knowledge. They don't want people to know how much they know, right? They're not out to show it off. When you debate, that might come out as a show off, right? And everybody knows somebody who has knowledge could be a show off too, right? They'll start to discuss things and they'll start to talk in a way that they're just really looking to show off. There's no need for it. Try to hide it as much as you can. Why? Because that's what Allah would love for you to do, not show off your knowledge. There are some statements of the early scholars that we'll read. First of all, we start with a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that mentions, this is a hard hadith to translate. No people ever go astray after being given guidance. No people go astray after being given guidance except they're given to argumentation or debate. Illa utul jadal. So jadal meaning the only thing that's going to ruin your guidance is if you go now into argumentation after you had guidance. So basically, super wrong, unacceptable. Imam Malik radiallahu anh, he says, there's no place for debate in this religion, arguing about this religion. Because the truth is truth. You want to seek it, you'll find it. There's no need to debate and argue about it. And now, if the person debating is seeking a benefit, then it could either be obligatory or recommended depending on the strength of the benefit. So sometimes there are people that have spread false beliefs about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as he has a body, or he's likened to creation, or he's sitting up literally in heaven, or that he has limbs and stuff like that. This is all considered kufr, or that he's sitting up in heaven, or anything like that. For a person to debate, to clarify those things, to get people out of that, could be obligatory, and is, because they need to clarify to people what the correct position of the Sharia is. But in that, it would be for qualified individuals and ulama to do so. So the scholars, they consider anybody who's not a scholar that it is prohibited, not allowed to argue, because they're arguing without knowledge. One, they don't know anything about the religion at a deep level, and then two, they don't even know the conditions that we're just talking about for debate. Right? So they're conditions. If anybody ever wanted to engage in debate, you said, do you know the conditions of debate? They're like, what are you talking about? We're not going to talk to you about it. And first of all, you have to have a certain amount of knowledge. And definitely, when it comes to the Quran, there's no debate. Not allowed to debate about the Quran. Anybody wants to argue about the Quran or something like that, just walk away. No need for discussion. Okay? Now, this is not to say that debate is not allowed at all. Rather, debate is allowed and is mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the consensus of the Ummah. As for the Quran, the proof is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions when people said, Ya Nuh, O Noah, you have debated us and debated us much. Right? So Nuh used to debate his people about idol worship. And that was absolutely needed because Nuh is not out for personal gain. He doesn't have arrogance. He's not trying to bring people over to him. He's trying to show people the correct belief of Allah. So he would argue and debate with them, as did Ibrahim. Why do you worship that which cannot talk, which cannot hear, which cannot benefit? Don't you have any brains? Can't you think? Don't you understand? Ibrahim could do that. Nuh can do that because they're people of insight. They're prophets. They had knowledge. So if you are at that level, which we're not, but the level of the great scholars, then you're able to debate, and that's proven by the Quran that debate is not always prohibited. Number two, in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it mentions a few. One, in that hadith, Sahih, the hadith, it mentioned that Adam and Musa debated. In the hadith, Adam and Musa debated. They debated about a matter. Right? What that story was is a different issue. But they had a discussion. Musa brought an argument against him. Adam answered him, and Adam was correct. So this is the debate that took place between Sayyidina Adam and Musa. What that debate was, those coming next week, I'll tell you about the debate. Let's see if you remember. And the consensus of the scholars, one of the great ulama, Ibn Qasar, he says that the companions have agreed that that it is permissible to debate, and that practice spread from them to those that followed them after, like the great Imams Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, and Ahmed. They all loved each other like you wouldn't believe. They all wanted the other to be correct. But they had discussions to arrive at what is the most authentic position on a matter. They did it without ego, without getting upset, without anything, pure love, discussing, what about this? Allah said that. And they did that in a very healthy and beautiful way. So there was nothing wrong with them doing that. This was their way. There are some other things worth mentioning here. Ibn al-Buna, one of our great Mauritanian scholars, he says, debate, which is a discussion between two people, is permissible according to the Sharia. This is if it is to attain truth, belief, or to reject falsehood. Debate has been practiced by virtuous people, such as the prophets, as we mentioned. There are different types of debate. He mentions a few points. If there is no intention, then this is disliked. It is prohibited to manifest that which is false, or conceal truth, or support your own nafs by bringing benefit or preventing harm to it. And on and on and on. There are some conditions that he attaches, that the person who's arguing is grounded in the rules of debate, that he knows the ruling of debate, the ruling itself, that it is disliked for the ulama, not allowed for normal people, but at times becomes obligatory, as we mentioned, to establish truth and for special people. And if you can protect yourself from those things, and if you can guarantee to tell the truth. So in that case, then debate could be allowed. As for what normal Muslims might do when they argue about the religion, right? They say things like, brother, in the Quran it says this. Alhamdulillah, in this masjid we really don't have this problem, but in bigger communities this is always the case. Somebody's always going to argue about something. People come up to you and they say, brother, it says this in the Quran. Brother, why do you pray like that? In the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said this. Brother, sister, how come you do this? You're not supposed to do this in Islam. They engage you and they want to argue with you, and they have none of this knowledge we're talking about. They don't have knowledge of fiqh, they don't know Quran, they don't know Sunnah. For you, my advice would be, anybody who starts that kind of talk, say salam alaikum. Just leave. Don't engage in a single statement. Don't say, you know what, have you ever studied the conditions of debate? Do you know when it's allowed? Do you know anything about ulama? How long did you study? You don't know anything. You're foolish. Get out of here. Don't do that. Say assalamu alaikum. I gotta go. I'm late. See you later. Just leave. No need to engage in an argument. Then other Muslims, they like to question people's positions. So if somebody prays with their hands down, which is a valid opinion in the Maliki madhab, they'll start to say, hey, where do you get this from? Because the Prophet prayed like this, and it's in the hadith, and blah, 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 blah. They start to say things out of ignorance that they don't have knowledge, and then the person who prays with their hands down might not know all the proofs of the Maliki school. So here they are, unqualified, not able to defend the Maliki position, and then they'll make Imam Malik, a'udhu billah, look bad in the Maliki position, and then you have a mess. So it's like, hey, brother, sister, I learned this from my teacher. Thank you for your concern, but I'm comfortable with it. Salam alaikum. That's it. Right? That's it. And people, those who correct people in masajid, I've found them 95% of the time probably to not have any knowledge. All they do is mislead others. Also, I would say that if you are on Facebook or social media, this also would be the same ruling. Arguing with people when there's absolutely no benefit. Right? So a person says on Facebook, here's a post basically would get 100 comments in like a minute. Somebody goes on there and says, what is the ruling of Mawlid? Right? Is music haram? I heard from the sheikh, he said, blah, blah, blah. Anything like this would spur a lot of comments, a lot of arguments, one Muslim arguing with another. Brother, this is allowed in Quran and Sunnah, right? Another person says, brother, this is allowed by the scholars. They don't know anything. We don't know who they are. This is prohibited in Islam. All these things are sinful. They're not qualified. They're not anybody that should give opinion. So I would say, if you are one of those people writing those things, you should not do so. I avoid all those things. I don't write anything. I could argue with people. I don't argue with them. I don't say anything. I just leave it. No need to. If it's somebody close to me, a family member saying things like that, not on Facebook where it's public comment, on my own, I'll approach them and tell them, please don't share that. You don't know what you're doing. This is incorrect position, etc. So that's a responsibility. And people on social media do it. They think they all know, everybody knows everything. And so they get in there and then they start to argue, they start to debate. Meanwhile, angels will count what you type against you or for you. Even what you type will be written against you. Not just what you say, but what you write. Because what you write is considered what you are saying. Right? So you have to be very careful. Advising an individual in public is not to be done. A specific individual, you go up to them and you correct them in front of people is not allowed. But if an individual did something wrong and you have a public discussion and bring it out, if you have a position of teaching, right, then if people will respect you or you have a position of respect and you can speak something and they'll listen, then it's recommended that in public you can do a general talk. But you cannot go up to somebody in a public gathering in front of others. Public meaning even if it's in front of themselves alone. They said that the Prophet ﷺ never used to say something disliked to somebody's face. He wouldn't tell them something they dislike in their face. If somebody did something that they were doing wrong, then he would give a talk and he would say, why do some people do this and people do that? Don't they know it should be like this and like that? So the person doesn't feel cornered. They don't feel attacked. They don't feel like they're being picked on, but it's a general lesson to everyone. Right? So, especially these days, I think that people, they're not going to listen to anybody who gives them advice. Definitely my experience is, Wallahu alam, that nobody ever on social media would listen to somebody giving them any advice. It's a zero. They never take it. Everybody in our time thinks they're their own God, they're their own king, they're their own queen. No one has any recognition that there's authority. There's no more authority. Shaitan says to everybody, you're the full authority. You don't need to follow anyone. You can say and do what you like. When it comes to the religion of Islam, if it's not religion and it's history, it's politics, it's philosophy, then people are hesitant to make comments because they'll look like a fool. So then they'll say, it's not my field, I better not say anything. Under, Scientific Discovery Journal, people are saying wonderful stuff, and then you get in there and say something, everybody laughs at you. Religion is the same. It should be left for the ulama and the scholars. Unfortunately, I think it's sad that sometimes imams and great scholars, they get in these debates with people on social media, and it's sad to see that. If a person is a scholar, then they have no need to be in there arguing with useless stuff. He's probably putting people in sin for arguing with people of knowledge. Right? They can make a short video and clarify matters with knowledge, and people want to follow it, they can follow it. But start commenting on people's stuff, and there's no benefit in that. So you can see that debate could be opened up to quite a big topic, right? Argumentation, debate. There's also a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that mentions that I guarantee a special tree in paradise for the one who leaves argumentation. Even if you're right, but you don't want to engage in argument, right? You don't want to engage in argument. Leave it because there's no benefit. One time the companions, they had a discussion and they had an argument, and the Prophet was very angry because that discussion was not beneficial. And he became very angry and he said, leave argumentation. Leave al-mira. Leave argumentation because I don't intercede for the one who argues. And that's a person, the scholars say, a person who always has a habit of debating. There are people like this. Everybody knows that person. Every gathering they walk into, they have to debate. I'm not talking about exchange knowledge, because there's people with etiquette, they'll say, brother, I read this and I was wondering what's your take on that, etc. There's an adab. But I'm talking about the kind of people who go to in any gathering, no one knows them, stay for a couple of minutes, hear something, and say, I disagree with you. And because they do this all the time. And they do that with ulama, with scholars. Right? So this is very sad, shameful, should not be done. And a person who has a habit of debating, even if they have the correct position, is considered to be a sinner because he's eventually going to sin and cause problems. So again, if one seeks out a benefit, these lines, the next lines read, if one seeks out a benefit through debate, then the ruling would be based on what it was being sought. So in other words, debate has that condition of intention. If your intention is noble, it's for the right thing. Debate may not be a bad thing, could be an obligatory thing, depending on who you are and what's your position. Okay? And if there's no benefit, no harm, this is makruh, no need to get involved, argue. Next thing, in the next line was some of the scholars considered constant debate to be a minor sin if a person does that constantly. Imam An-Nawawi has an opinion that a quote here that I thought was worthy and worth noting. He said, Nawawi says, someone said, I have not seen anything that removes religion, detracts from dignity, and takes away pleasure, and preoccupies the heart more than debate. So debate destroys your religion, your dignity, and takes away your pleasure of life and everything else through debate, arguing. There's a very bad feeling you get after arguing with people. There's no benefit. Sometimes people would try to argue with Imam Malik, he would just get up and leave. You just get up and leave. And recently there was a great scholar of Yemen and Saudi Arabia. This guy got up in the middle of his lecture in front of, several hundred students of his. He started debating the sheikh. He said, sheikh, you're wrong about this. This is bid'ah and this and that. In front of everybody. The sheikh, he didn't say anything. He stayed quiet the whole time. He said, thank you for the class. He got up and he went home. That's it. Got up and went home. That night, the guy, people talked to him about what kind of scholar this is, his knowledge. They corrected his understanding. He came either the next day or very shortly after. He apologized to the sheikh and he became a student. That's the good character of the sheikh. If the sheikh said, hey guys, can you take him outside? Teach him a lesson. Right? Sheikh showed him the best of etiquette of how to deal with an ignorant person. So my teacher once told me, Jawab al-Jahil al-Sukut. The answer to an ignorant person is to remain silent.
How would you advise somebody who you see is doing something blatantly wrong? Would you just stay silent about it?
At times, yes. They say that if you are debating or arguing with someone you know there's no benefit, no need to say anything, even if they're doing wrong. You advise and you help when you see that there's a benefit. Unfortunately, in our time, people don't like anybody to tell them what to do. So it's rare. If you are close with them, they're your friends, then you should advise them. You have to. But if you don't know them well, then you should take some precautionary steps of how to advise them, because there could be harm. The scholars say when you advise someone or you command them to something good, but there's a fear that it could lead to something worse, then please don't advise them at all. Leave them alone, because it could ruin them worse. As for a person who is oppressed, and they don't argue with falsehood or excessiveness or go what is beyond necessary, and they don't have an intention to be stubborn or harming anyone, this is not prohibited. So a person who's wronged or oppressed, he can engage in an argument, Hey, my house is messed up. You said you were going to take care of it. You didn't. This is the type of debate and arguing that would be allowed, because he has a haq, as long as he doesn't lie or he's stubborn or something else. So it's not always that debate is something bad, and it's not always that debate is forbidden. It would depend on the particular situation. There are some adab of debate, and we'll end with this one. The adab is silently listening to one's opponent when the other one person speaks. Do you ever see that? No, you don't. A person who's engaged in a debate, their emotions are going, they're trying to prove the other person wrong, they're not going to say, what's your take? Okay, I see your point. Let me think about that. They're like, hurry up, because I got stuff I want to say. Hurry up, hurry up. They're waiting for when they stop and pause, and then they jump in. But you're this, and you don't know anything, and da-da-da. The next adab is not straying from the topic. Stick to the topic. Right? This happened to me not that long ago. This person started arguing with me about something. First of all, she asked me about a ruling in Islam on something. I told her I'm not a scholar, but I've heard my teachers, they say this, this, and that. So you ask me a question, there's your answer. Then she said, but it says in a hadith this, but in the Quran. I got a little upset over time, and I told her, you don't even know Arabic. You can't use hadiths. You got to know Arabic. These are ulama. It upsets me when people attack scholars because you have no knowledge of Arabic. How can you attack ulama? You don't even know Arabic. How can you attack ulama? So I told her, I said, sister, it's not good to debate, but, just follow what you think is right. It upset me a lot. Then I decided that I will never have another conversation about Islam with her. If she asks me about anything, I'm just not going to answer her, because it's just going to lead into an argument, and I don't do that. If you want to know what I think, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to argue with you. If the minute you open your mouth to counter-engage me, salam alaikum. Otherwise, this person is such a nice person. Very nice, good etiquette, everything. But the minute they got into religion, it's as if they own religion and they have the stubborn view. That I learned what stubbornness means, right? A person hates you or is angry with you, you're like, that's a wall. Just because they're mad about everything. That's not a wall, really. It's part of a building. It's not a wall. Because that stubbornness and that anger blinds them from something so evident. The next one to be to raise one's voice with dignity, not to get out of control. Right? Because when people debate, it gets louder and louder. Right? If people debate, it gets louder. The person feels like if you can get louder, you have a better position. You're not supposed to do that. Here's another adab. Imagine this one. This one, I want you to imagine this one. Not being delighted when one wins. So it's not like after the debate is over, yeah, alhamdulillah. Thank you, brothers. I knew about it. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. I told you, man. No. If you win, the person says, brother, you're right, mashallah. Then you say, alhamdulillah. A'udhu billah. You didn't want that to be manifest on you, but it happened to be the truth. Okay? When I was young, just a side note, I stayed up all night with one of my friends from high school. We argued about Islam and Christianity all night long. It's what young people do. I saw him like 8 years later, and he says, hey, remember that night? I'm like, yeah, I remember that night. He's like, I'm sorry I debated you. I realized you were right. I was like, what did you say? He's like, yeah, man, you were right. I was like, all right, alhamdulillah. Ready to say shahada? All right. Another etiquette would be asking questions precisely and nicely, answering accordingly and clearly. These are all part of etiquette. Looking at all these conditions and looking at this adab, can you possibly say there could be a legit debate in our time? I don't believe it personally. I don't believe it. I don't think it's going to happen. So stay away from engaging any argument, discussion. My favorite one that this always occurs is things like, do I have to follow a madhab? What is the correct aqidah? People engage in everything with you all the time. So anyway, the next section says, the next area is controversial because we live in America in this time. But it mentions the lines, for a man to let a non-mahram woman hear his voice when he knows that she loves to hear it is prohibited. Likewise, for a woman to raise her voice if she fears that someone may derive pleasure from it and has been counted amongst the prohibitions. So basically, what is that?
Are men allowed to sing?
No, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
No, because you said like the raising of the voice that wouldn't be allowed if someone likes your voice. So would singing be allowed for?
Oh, singing. I heard sinning a lot.
No.
Singing was actually the topic of last week. I have the class recorded. I put it up. I'm out of some memory, but it should be up. Watch the week before, not this Friday, last Friday. Yeah, no. I'll send you, inshallah. I'll give you the channel before you leave, and it has all these lectures on it. So, some notes to share, very important. There's a principle that mentions whatever is not permissible to listen to will not be allowed to let others hear. So if you cannot listen to it, you cannot have others hear it as well. So the raising of the woman's voice is not allowed because of the fear of fitna. For that reason alone really is why they're prohibited from giving the adhan. Why else would women not be allowed to give the adhan? For the very fact that her voice may be attractive to other people. A lot of these rulings for you guys, it's hard to understand because you're growing up in the 21st century where every corruption is strife and apparent and existent everywhere at a lot worse levels than what we're talking about here. So for you to say, raising of the voice, really? There's like half-naked people walking around everywhere all the time where we live. Understand that even though something is prevalent everywhere does not make it okay. At the time of the prophets before, things were prevalent so much everywhere, it didn't make it okay. When the punishment of Allah came, things were wiped out, things were removed. No matter how much something wrong has spread, does not make it okay. There has to be a group that stands up for what's right, always. Okay? So, this is something to keep in mind, especially if any woman is deciding to go into a career of singing, which would be absolutely not allowed, right? Let alone a man. And we discussed last week the rulings of it. If there are things in prohibited matters and others, some of the scholars consider that prohibited as well, even for men. Okay? So, there are, apart from her voice, there's also an important thing to mention, which is, he says, that also counted from among the prohibitions is for a man to imitate women in either their voices or other matters. And the opposite, which is women imitating men, follows the same rule. And essentially what that's saying is that the Prophet ﷺ cursed men that imitate women and women that imitate men. Okay?
But what if it's just like as a joke?
Let me, even as a joke would not be allowed. Yeah, good question. So now, very important thing that I'm going to read here. In what things is this imitation considered in? Essentially, this is in dress. This is in dress. That a man does not dress like a woman. Okay? Nor that a woman dress like a man. And in certain characteristics. That there are certain things men do in their characteristic, and there are certain things women do in their characteristic. And not to copy one another, or not to imitate. Or similar movements, or anything that is really something restricted to something women are generally known to do. Men should not do, and vice versa. Now, if a person naturally has a habit where a man acts feminine, but they're not meaning to, they're not trying to imitate women. It's just their nature. It's just maybe the way they are. If that's not their intention, they're not blameworthy. In other words, they're not being cursed in this category. So if a man walks a certain way that looks very girly, or he talks in a way that's very feminine, nonetheless, that would not be prohibited if his intention is not, I want to be like a woman. It's just his nature. He should try to remove it, but if it's natural, he's not held accountable for that. Okay? Somebody might say, God, he acts like a girl, but it's just his nature. He can't help it. He's not trying to. Don't put blame on that person. Be careful with these things, especially making fun of people. We don't make fun of sins. It's a very bad thing to do, right? People who make fun of other people because of what they're doing, Allah will test them by putting them in their very same position, right? Whenever somebody does something wrong, feel love and pity for them. Love them for the sake of Allah, that you want guidance for them. Feel pity for them because they're doing something wrong. Make dua for them that Allah guide them. This is what we should do. You don't see somebody say, this is a sign of somebody who has really low intellect. They have no brains. Because this is arrogance, they have to have arrogance, they have to be pretty foolish. They have to be very foolish. Concerning making fun, when the Bani Israel told Musa, are you making fun of us? Do you remember what he said? He said, I seek refuge in Allah from being amongst the Jahilin. So Musa equated playing jokes and jesting from being amongst the Jahilin, the ignorant people. It's not what he does.
So how about being sarcastic? If you're not is being sarcastic something that you should?
You can be sarcastic or make jokes, but you cannot make fun of people's states and behavior in that sarcasm. So if you say jokes or things that isn't related to people's conditions or something prohibited, that's nothing wrong necessarily. But it is wrong when you jest and you joke about a people's condition or their level of sin or their ignorance or their state or their clothing. Any way that you make what is called istihza. And we covered this, if you guys recall, in this earlier. It talks about making fun, that's not allowed. And Allah prohibits that also in the Quran. He said, don't let some of you make fun of others. It may be that group becomes better than the former group, right? So that's a very good question. Yes, you can joke around in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ at times told light jokes, but he did it in a beautiful way that was truthful. He lightened the mood, and he only did that because human beings cannot handle constant seriousness. You can't. A person can't be serious 24 hours. Okay? I've seen my teacher where he gets like really mad, and right after the dars he's level, he's relaxed, and he's joking. Everything has a time for it. When someone's getting married, one of the things noted in our time, like my sheikh said, people get married now, it's all serious. When there's a nikah, everybody's all serious. Like, it's a business deal going down. Everybody's so serious at a marriage. And marriage isn't when you're supposed to have fun, when you're supposed to joke and be happy and merry, as the British would say. But not all serious and, as if somebody died. It's not the place for that. Right? It's a place, getting married is a joyous occasion. You're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to demonstrate happiness. You're at a legit halal party. Don't act in a sad and somber mode. You should go home if you feel like that. Right? You're supposed to be happy. So in Islam, it's such a beautiful way that we are taught every situation has different demands of how we should be. At times we should be happy. At times we should be sad. At times we should not joke around. At times we can joke around. At times we can make, I don't want to say fun of things, because in general that's not a good thing to do, but definitely at times we're not allowed to make fun of people, their state, how they look, how they behave, how they talk. Okay? One more line, because this is important. He says, female students must not joke with their male teacher unless he is a mahram, unless he's somebody that she cannot marry, like her uncle, her nephew, right? Her brother. If that's her teacher, she can joke around with him, or if it's her husband. If it is not, it is prohibited for a woman to make jokes with her male teacher, right? This is absolutely not allowed, because this is not the place for that. This is in a way almost like flirting, and flirting is haram. It's not allowed to flirt, not allowed to joke, and there's a type of serious relationship. Because in Islam, and let me tell you, in America, living here, the most slightest of innocent gestures is what leads to something haram. A man and woman are hanging out together. She laughs in a way, he looks at her, and just because of that certain laugh, he falls in love with her. It happens. Then there's an attraction, and then haram things happen. Okay? There has to be seriousness. And see, I told you, there's times we laugh, there's times we joke, but this is an area we don't joke. Men and women who are not related to each other cannot openly have fun and discussions and laugh and joke with one another. So a man and women are walking together, they're not related to each other. She jokes with him, he jokes with her. This is like you're going out, you're on a date. It's not you're Muslim person A and they're Muslim person B. This is not allowed. This is why specifically it mentions this. And worse than that, Imam Suyuti and others, they say, whoever winks at a woman or laughs with her should be lashed 20 times for doing so. This is the old times, when they didn't allow illicit behavior. This is not something. Imagine your daughter, which you guys don't have. I have a daughter. Your wife, and somebody winks at her and walks with her and laughs with her. Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, what happened when Sayyidina Abu Musa brought a gift? He wasn't home, but he gave it to his wife. Do you guys know the story? Umar ibn Khattab, he's out. Sayyidina Abu Musa knocks on his door. He's not home. He brought a little prayer rug as a gift. Okay? And Omar wasn't home, so he said, this is for my brother as a gift. She took it from him and she put it out. But Omar's not there. You see? It's really hard for you guys to understand, because you're growing up in 21st century Santa Barbara. But just 50 years ago in classical societies, and I bet it was true for Mexicans and others that were not in Western cultures. Okay? Just ask your grandparents. Ask them. Research. Sayyidina Omar, he comes, and he says, oh, what is this? He said, this is a gift. He said, who brought this? He said, Abu Musa. He said, you came here? He said, yes. You all know what Omar's going to do. He wrapped up the rug. He went to the market. He hit Abu Musa on his head. He said, don't bring me these kind of gifts again. How dare you give this to my wife and I'm not home? Right? Now, this also should teach us all a lesson. The amount of what you're all exposed to in public schools should start getting you to think. The amount of what you guys are exposed to in public school and in this behavior, no way are anybody safe from this. Wouldn't you agree? Men and women, they talk, you establish this early habit. You go into college, you have work groups, you work together, you joke together. You go into workplaces and your colleague, they talk, they hug you. Hey, Abdul, salam, and blah, 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 blah. All this haram is happening all the time. And it is your responsibility to establish your parameter of safety. But the worst thing and the least of what I need to do is to teach you this so you all know that where Islam establishes certain levels and where just because people are not acting on it or practicing it doesn't mean it's not the ruling. Okay? And I will mention this just to kind of put things in perspective. So you should kind of really consider it. There's a hadith that threatens this in even worse extent about laughing and being really flirtatious with the opposite gender of which you're not related to, with even a worse punishment. So, in general, try to keep things basically professional. Whenever brothers and sisters talk, because there's a need and there's adab, and the best adab is basically to, as brothers, don't look at women of whom you're not related to, especially if she's older age that you can marry her. There's no reason people should look at each other direct staring. It's not adab. It's not etiquette. The best etiquette is the etiquette of the Messenger of Allah. How is the Prophet described when he used to talk to people? Who remembers this from the seerah? Does anybody remember? What did he do? He looked down. Not only at women, but also at men. The Prophet would not look at men more than a few seconds. Most Sahaba would not look at him. When the Prophet ﷺ used to look up and talk, companions used to put their head down. Some of them actually never found the courage to even stare at him. They couldn't. It was considered something of the Arabian Peninsula that it took a certain level of courageousness and power and level of achievement before you can just stare at somebody. You can't. You have to lower your gaze. So most of the descriptions of the Prophet ﷺ come from children who described him, not men, because the men would never look at him. It's out of respect. So the Prophet had a habit where he would always look down out of his shyness. So generally he would always look down. Once in a while he would look up and then he would look down. They say from that it's also very powerful because the eye is like a mirror into the heart. Right? And Imams have written things on staring at people. That is not a good habit. Right? Staring. So in general, it's not a good thing to do. What this teaches us is definitely there's no dating. There's no going out with anybody unless you're going to marry them. Okay? Number one. Number two, there's no such thing as a girl having a friend who's a guy. And there's no such thing as a guy having a friend who's a girl. If they're a colleague at work, that's a different matter of which your relationship with them is restricted to your work dealings. Not, and hey, by the way, since we're off and we finished the project, you want to grab a coffee real quick? I'm going to give her dawah. No, you're not. Okay? No, you're not going to have coffee either. Salam alaikum. Okay? Or bye-bye. Good evening. Right? They might think you're a freak. They might think you're weird, but that's okay. Because in reality, we are to Western people. We're a little weird. Right? It's like, oh my God, what are you doing? I got to pray. Can't you just pray? Like, people freak out over stuff. But nonetheless, you should have dignity, and people respect you once they understand you. And Muslim women who wear hijab, in particular, naturally men, they back off because they know because of the hijab, they don't engage and often talk to them. Right? They hold back a little bit from women who wear hijab. Women that don't wear hijab, and then they also wear makeup and beautify themselves, and then they're engaged in workplaces, that's a whole other issue. Okay. So, it is my job to tell you the truth and to teach you what ulama have mentioned. If you can practice this, may Allah bless you. If you cannot practice it, make it a goal in your life to practice it. Okay? وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.